Currency and empire. The United States dominates what might be called the seafaring imperium, developed during Europe's great age of global exploration. The 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries saw the establishment of sea routes around the Horn of Africa and across the Atlantic, where Europe discovered and developed the Americas as a source of raw materials and a point of transshipment joining the world's great oceans. Satisfaction with this accomplishment might now be usefully tempered with the consideration that the current U.S.-NATO seaborne economic hegemon is, in broad historical terms, something of a stopgap. For most of human history, the great issue in planet Earth's global economic logistics has been transshipment of economic goods back and forth across the Eurasian landmass. Europe only turned west to the oceans when Mongol and Arab peoples began to extract intolerable tribute from Silk Road traffic. Capital accumulated by protracted favorable trade balances, engineering advancements, and late political developments have now recreated the possibility of economically efficient land routes between Asia and Europe. If realized, this possibility would recapture the old Silk Road's geographic attractions by bringing more natural resources closer to their natural points of recombination and consumption. So there now ensues something of an existential rivalry between the long-established seaborne economic empire of the NATO Anglosphere and a nascent land-based Eurasia Economic Union. Controlling interest in the seafaring imperium's assets has become concentrated in a very small number of investment houses, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. These institutions' principal shareholders constitute the West's global power elite. Their interests are formulated and expressed through generous support of institutions having welcome in the corridors of power. The Council on Foreign Relations, Davos, the Club of Rome, the World Economic Forum, et al. Our power elites are global only in the sense that a concentration of ownership is not moored to any sense of national loyalty, and can therefore be truly international in outlook. Their preeminence is threatened by the prospective Eurasian imperium's proximity to primary resources and emerging markets. Continuation of the elite's prosperity requires that commerce continue flowing through their trade corridors, and that the petrodollar remains the only currency with which to acquire vital energy resources. Dollar hegemony is maintained by the police powers of the United States and those within its sphere of influence, and by the financial power to interdict an uncooperative nation's foreign trade. Their tools of enforcement have, at one time or another, included 1. The impounding of financial or physical assets, including bullion deposits, and 2. Exclusion from the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, or SWIFT system. SWIFT is the global messaging network through which substantially all international financial transactions presently flow. At bottom, a financial messaging system is nothing more than a computer network managing a global ledger. Such structures are easily created by world-class economic powers, and several are already operating in service to trade with near-abroad nations. Russia's System for Transfer of Financial Messages and the Chinese Cross-Border Interbank Payment System are examples. The agents of the U.S. NATO hegemon, which is to say the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Trade Organization, have hesitated to support infrastructure projects in Eurasia and the Global South, such as China's Belt and Road Initiative. This has led to rival funding consortia such as the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and the new Development Bank run by the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. These emerging funding and trade mechanisms are identified with the prospective new trade corridors showing here. Note that the Anglosphere and the United States have no links to this network. Russia and China, as signatories to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, have already taken the first steps toward unifying their currencies. And both have been sacrificing current consumptions in order to build up their gold reserves, thereby asserting their domestic currency's suitability as a reserve currency. It would be difficult to account for these initiatives other than as provisions for an economic order that might follow de-Westernization of the global economy. Money is being weaponized in service to low-grade proxy wars among global rivals. Petrodollar hegemony is currently challenged by Iran's willingness to accept the yuan in exchange for its petroleum exports. Iran, currently debarred from the SWIFT system as punishment for its history of conflict with Israel, would otherwise be required to barter in exchange for its exports. Russia, having been removed from participation in the SWIFT system as punishment for its Ukrainian initiatives, is requiring that any nation it designates must pay for Russian gas and oil in rubles or gold. Meanwhile, Russia is constructing bilateral arrangements with India for selling its oil without an intervening reserve currency. De-dollarization has launched the world economic system on what might be a perilous transit toward a new global reference commodity. This process initiates the approach of hazards in the form of uncontrolled currency speculation by clever arbitrageurs exploiting unstable politics, or even a gold market made chaotic by a few revealed falsifications of substantial inventories. Dissolution of the petrodollar has led certain global elites, most notably the Club of Rome and the World Economic Forum, to reconsider Keynes' bancor. The principal attraction of Keynes' abstract basis for international financial settlements would be to obviate the requirement that any single nation's domestic currency would be burdened with also providing the medium for international trade settlements, which is exactly what undid the essentially gold-backed U.S. dollar in 1971 and put us on the path to the disorders and international tensions of early 2022. Keynes' specification of the bancor did not include a reference commodity against which his new international currency might be calibrated. Rather, he indicated that solid reference commodities, such as an agreed quantum of gold, or some widely used physical resource, or a market basket of commodities, would ultimately defeat his intent. This leaves us to infer that some duly constituted directorate of engineers and technicians would be given unrestrained latitude to manage the new global financial institutions, having exclusive authority to transact the bancor, and to set the values of national currencies relative to it. There always exists a human longing for some sort of directorate that might acquire and faithfully apply the wisdom necessary to continuously and efficiently adjust the economic order to its ever-changing boundary conditions. And equally, there always persist questions as to the source and particulars of the wisdom to be posited with the directorate, or the source and particulars of the authority through which the directorate might act. A possibility for resolving this impasse was glimpsed in a webzine article investigating prospects for evaluating cryptocurrencies. Here the author describes a prospective global reference commodity, a currency that cannot be counterfeited, hidden, confiscated, hoarded, lost, misrepresented, or cornered, because it is an abstraction that anybody can compute on the basis of 1. A self-evident scientific premise, and 2. Information of a sort that is publicly available now. We are gratified in that this passage was in direct, stated reference to SFEcon's demonstrations of the computational possibility for a completely abstract global reference commodity, or global currency unit, or GCU. The self-evident premise quantifying the GCU is Pareto optimality, the idea that general efficiency with order is the highest good that the economic system might deliver. The publicly available information comprised in the GCU would be the shapes of our production and utility trade-offs. As set out in our video on the value question, ultimate value resides in these boundary conditions of economic computation, the determination of which is a commonplace among the world's national statistical agencies. If useful occupation is to be found for the sorts of people who nominate themselves to serve in global economic directorates, they might find form in a privately funded global statistical agency dedicated to maintaining a historical record of economic activity in terms of the hyperbolic utility parameters that enable computation of the GCU. Were these data compiled with transparency and made publicly available, they would likely be used to compute absolute currency and commodity values. No central agency would be needed to compel these computations, nor to dictate the actions to be taken with their results. Public and private agents would be free to negotiate however they might, and to enforce their contracts however they can. But their contracts would be in terms of an ultimate value standard, having no more variability than the board foot, the troy ounce, or the short ton. The Barbarous Relic might be finally retired in favor of an abstract measure of absolute value. Instead of ingots being moved around in vaults, accounting entries would move abstract value units around in column 0 of the International Input-Output Matrix. Of course, all of this depends on the economics professions accepting the possibility that their calculation problem can be solved. Another quote from that webzine article suggests some thawing of their position. Economic non-computability is the most shameless, and certainly the best financed, academic fraud since the Piltdown Man.